DC's commuter rail systems suck. While cities like Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York have several routes, many of which run both ways, all day, every day, hourly service, only one of DC's routes meets this criteria. So, what if DC actually had good commuter rail? Which I'll be referring to as regional rail, because good commuter rail should actually serve more than just commuters. While I plan to go over a proper region scale system eventually, today I will be focusing on what I think could be the backbone of a good DC and Baltimore regional rail system, running from Edgewood, Maryland to Triangle, Virginia, with some trains continuing as far as Wilmington, Delaware, and Fredericksburg, Virginia. This video will count as my submission to the Classy Whale One Line More contest. More information in the description or pinned comment. Let's take a look at the current services. We have Maryland's MARC, which runs 3 lines, the Brunswick, Camden, and Penn, and Virginia's 2 lines, the Fredericksburg and Manassas. Today, we're only going to be considering the Fredericksburg, Penn, and Camden lines. I'll cover the other route alternatives in the future. Let's go over the current routings. The Penn line starts from DC Union Station towards Baltimore on the Northeast Corridor. It has stops at Union Station, New Carrollton, Seabrook, Bowie State University, Odenton, BWI Airport, Hillthorpe, West Baltimore, and most services ending at the Baltimore Penn Station. This route runs trains all day, every day, roughly hourly, even on weekends. This is for 2 reasons. First, the track here is owned by Amtrak, allowing for priority passenger service. Second, this route connects DC to BWI Airport and is an incredibly important link for the area. While this route also connects DC to Baltimore, the Camden line does that as well. Beyond Penn Station, the route continues peak direction and peak time on weekdays only, towards Perryville, with stops at Martin Airport, Edgewood, and Aberdeen, ultimately ending in Perryville. If you want to see my experience on MARC, I'll have a video to that linked here. Next, the Fredericksburg line. This line runs peak direction, peak time weekday only service from DC Union Station to Spotsylvania in Virginia. There are stops at DC Union, L'Enfant Plaza, Crystal City, Alexandria, Franconia, Springfield, Lorton, Woodbridge, Ripon, Potomac Shores eventually, Quantico, Brook, Leland Road, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania. These routes are the longest on the system and are crucial regional connectors in great need of improvement. So, here's my plan. 1 route. Okay, it's going to be more complicated than that. First of all, what about the Camden line? I brought that up earlier. The Camden line is a secondary route connecting DC and Baltimore. It runs peak time, weekdays only, bidirectional from DC Union Station to Camden Yard Station in Baltimore. It's definitely the worst of the 2 routes, but runs in a more densely populated corridor between the 2 cities, with stops in Riverdale, College Park, Greenbelt, Muirkirk, Laurel Racetrack, Savage, Jessup, Dorsey, and St. Denis. I plan on integrating the Camden line as a bit of a branch line. I'll go over exact service patterns later, but some trains will take the Camden line track instead of the Penn line track. Now let's go over to Google Earth and take a look at my proposed routing and stations. We'll start here in the south at Spotsylvania Courthouse. This is already a station on VRE. This is the terminus station. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but there is a little bit of development around it. This is on CSX trackage, so this would require either some meticulous negotiation or for the law requiring passenger rail to have priority to actually be enforced. VRE is actually already working on some pretty meticulous timetable negotiations, so VRE is likely going to get a lot more service in the near future, even without having to enforce any laws that are already on the books. Follow this up north to Fredericksburg. We got Leland Road, Brook, also in the middle of nowhere. It's also a station that already exists, so far all of them are. Quantico. And then here we're going to have a bit of a split off. I'm going to go over the Greenfield route that I would want to do first. Then we're going to go over, if that's not possible, going through the right-of-way that already exists. So the way I would prefer to go would come up here to a bit more of a densely urbanized area versus this running along the coast without a lot of development. So first would be a station at Southbridge. Then we'd come up around here. This is down a hydro corridor. This is where some power lines are. To the massive Potomac Mills Mall. Then over to a new Woodbridge station. And this would go from the hydro corridor to alongside I-95. Unfortunately, it's not possible to put that down the middle of the road because a certain governor decided to put express lanes there instead. Then they would meet up over here. If that's not possible, we would use the existing VRE stations at Ripon, Woodbridge, and it would join back up over here. If we keep going north towards Lorton, this is where the auto train is, even though that's closer to over here. It's actually two different stations. Keep going north up to Franconia Springfield for the first transfer station with the DC Metro, Alexandria, Crystal City, and across the Long Bridge into the pre-existing station at LaFont Plaza and DC Union Station. From here, we swap over to Amtrak, so we wouldn't have to deal with nearly as much for timetable negotiations, and we would have right-of-way over freight rail. From here, we would split off between the Camden and Penn routes. We're going to go for the Penn route first. Stop at Fort Lincoln to serve this nearby business complex. This Costco I know is super popular. Though ultimately, I don't know how useful that station would be because it is quite far and I don't really know that there's a better place to put it. Next would be a stop at Cheverly. I also don't know if this one would be the best idea. Cheverly is a pretty low ridership station, but I think it would be great to have here because it is the first interchange with the Orange Line. Then at New Carrollton, we have access to Amtrak and the Purple Line, as well as the Orange Line. Seabrook already exists. The Old Town Bowie station here actually used to exist but closed, I think, a couple decades ago. I would bring this back. Then I would also keep the current station at Bowie State University. From here, we enter the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge with not a lot going on. Here is the pre-existing Odenton station, and then the station here in Severn would be new. Next up would be BWI Airport. Halethorpe already exists. Artebuse, which would be new. Next would be the pre-existing station at West Baltimore. From here, there would be no extra stations as we come into Baltimore Penn Station. This area over here is already better served by local Baltimore Transit. And more importantly, the track through here is underground. I don't think making a new station here is going to happen. Beyond Penn Station, we would have a new stop at Milton Montford, or somewhere nearby here, but I think that's not a bad location. There wouldn't be anything through this industrial area as much as I would want to serve, like, the Colgate neighborhood over here. I really don't see a way to make that easily accessible. Next stop would be over in Middlesex. You could have that station over here, or really anywhere along this stretch I think would be equally useful. Then there would be the pre-existing stop at Martin State Airport, which I'm not even sure has commercial service, so I'm not sure how useful that stop actually is. We'd have a stop at Gunpowder. This would be new. Edgewood, this one already exists. Beyond Edgewood, we would keep going with a stop in Aberdeen. This one also already exists. Havre de Grace, I'm not sure this would work because I think this is on a bridge incline here. It's hard to tell with the Google Earth imagery. I would really like to have a station here though. Not sure if it's really possible. A stop in Perryville, which is the current terminus. Northeast, all the stations from here would be new or shared with SEPTA once we get really far out. Elkton, Newark, this would be the first interchange station with SEPTA and is the current terminus of their Wilmington line. Churchman's Crossing, Newport, this would be a brand new station. I think SEPTA would also benefit from having one here, or at least nearby, because that industrial estate doesn't look particularly pleasant. And lastly, terminating in Wilmington. So MARC does have some plans to bring service at least as far as Newark, but really my point with that is like you're just gonna go to Newark. You're not gonna, keep going to the much larger city that is Wilmington that's like right up the tracks. Okay. No, we're going to bring service all the way into Wilmington. That's what we're going to do. Now, let's go over the Camden branch. So starting back in DC, if we take the Northernmore track and head into Maryland on CSX trackage, so we would have to have some timetable negotiation or pre-existing law actually be enforced, we would head our first new station at Brentwood. This area is not well served by Metro, and there have been some proposals to run a new Metro line down this route actually. Next, I would have a stop in downtown Hyattsville. I would actually get rid of this station here in Riverdale, mostly because it would be well served by this Hyattsville stop already, which would be better located. The Riverdale station's right here, but I would move this down here to better serve Hyattsville, which is a lot denser. Keep going north to the pre-existing station at College Park with a Green Line and Purple Line transfer next to the massive University of Maryland. I would choose to not bring back the Berwyn station. I don't think there's the traffic here. Keep going to Greenbelt, final station on the Green Line. I would add a new station in Beltsville around here. Beltsville is not served by Metro or MARC at all, and I think the station would be really beneficial. Keep going down to the existing Muirkirk station. South Laurel would also be a new station. The Laurel station already exists. I would ditch the Laurel racetrack station. It's like weird, one way. It's pretty much a seasonal stop, and it's really close to the Laurel station. So how about you just build a little like pedestrian walkway over here? I think that would be perfectly acceptable. Keep going down the route here to Savage, already exists. Jessup, already there. Dorsey, already there. And then from here we would hit a split. Most trains would take this new Greenfield route and continue on to BWI Airport and would join up and head over towards Baltimore and Wilmington this way. But some trains would continue down the pre-existing Camden Line route to Camden Yard Station. From here, I would actually move the Dorsey station up to an Elk Ridge station over here. Keep going to St. Denis, which already exists, up towards Lansdowne, which would be new, same with Morrill Park, and finally ending at Camden Yards. Now, with this area being a little bit of a mess, it is going to take a little bit of schedule trickery, but I'll go over that here in a bit. And here's what that route would look like on a transit map. Now for the service pattern. The most frequent areas of this track would see service about every 10 minutes on various service routes, while the furthest out areas would see minimum twice hourly. Even if this exact schedule couldn't take place and trains couldn't quite run this frequently, having some service along this path, even just hourly, would still be a pretty dramatic improvement. The first service is Route A for all stations. This stops at every station from Fredericksburg to Wilmington via Bowie. Next is Route B for Bowie. This service stops at every station from Triangle to Edgewood via Bowie. Next is Route C for Camden. This route stops at every station from Alexandria to Camden Yard via Laurel. Next is Route D for Dorsey, stopping at every station from Triangle to Edgewood via Laurel. And lastly is Route E, or Express. This one's a little bit complicated. It stops at every stop from Fredericksburg to Alexandria, then runs skip stop to Washington Union, BWI, Baltimore Penn, then runs every stop from Martin State Airport to Wilmington. The timetable would run as follows. There would be a train every 10 minutes. At the top of the hour would be the B line, 10 minutes the D, 20 A, 30 B, 40 C, and 50 E. Now, some of you may have noticed there are some problems along this route, especially considering the very frequent proposed traffic here. Most obviously, freight traffic and Union Station. Simply shifting priority passenger rail will legitimately get in the way of freight traffic if there are 10-minute frequencies. A proposal like this would definitely require extra tracks to be built between Quantico and Hillthorpe, as well as a rail junction at Hillthorpe, which is already being planned. Union Station is also about to undergo a massive renovation as Amtrak just bought the station, but trains with this level of frequency would require a pretty drastic overhaul on its own. Penn Station isn't nearly as busy as Union, but I could foresee congestion here as well. Alternatively, some adjustments to the schedule I proposed, making some services maybe only run every 2 hours instead of every hour, could also alleviate the tracks for freight traffic as well, but hey, this is Fantasyland, let's just build more tracks. There are a few grade crossings, but the areas where these are common are only served by the less frequent schedules, so prioritizing grade separation isn't the top priority. The Camden Line is the main area along this route where there's still several crossings. The Northeast Corridor is almost entirely grade separated until you get to Connecticut, and the Fredericksburg Line I really couldn't find many issues with. I'll be perfectly honest, I have no idea how to calculate costs for this, but here are some things that could rack up a pretty decent bill. Extra tracks in some areas, the rail junction at Hillthorpe, station renovations, especially at Penn and Union, train procurement, timetable schedule purchasing, eliminating grade crossings, planning and administration, and advertisement and public outreach. As far as how money could be raised, a large chunk would be redirected for funding from MARC and VRE, of which this system would be meant to replace. Let's just ignore the Brunswick and Manassas lines for now. Some money would also be generated from fares. I would also recommend merging whatever regional rail authority runs this system with WMATA for region scale efficiency. Also, let's introduce a consistent funding source for WMATA instead of a state-by-state negotiating disaster every year, especially considering WMATA would now serve Delaware. A region scale sales tax makes the most sense. Initial build-out could be covered by federal and state grants. WMATA could also buy property near the station to make money from real estate investment, which is a really common strategy in Asia. We would also give MTA a seat at the table as well, because this would run and service Baltimore and connect with their light rail and metro. For rolling stock, I would like to see the Stadler FLIRT diesel electric locomotives and rolling stock, like is seen on TEXRail in the DFW Metroplex and the Ottawa O train. While the Northeast Corridor is electrified, the Fredericksburg and Camden lines are not. So that takes Caltrain's new KISS EMUs out of the question, at least until the whole route is electrified. The FLIRT can run on both electrified and diesel parts of the network. These trains should be configured closer to the O train, since this route runs like an express metro from Alexandria to Baltimore Penn. This would include more doors, better wayfinding and destination boards, and metro-like longitudinal seating. Making these trains look similar to the DC and Baltimore subway trains, which already look pretty similar to each other, may help new riders feel more comfortable on these new trains. Of course, don't go full metro, as some people will be on these trains for over an hour. Restrooms, tray tables, outlets, etc. are a must. And if the Purple Line can have bike parking, so can these. As much as I would like to use entirely low-floor trains, I think this is a good compromise for a metro-like commuter rail train capable of running on diesel power. MARC and VRE already have some pretty good stations, and a lot of them could get by with minimal renovation. In my opinion, a lot of stations, especially on the DC Metro, are really overbuilt. And these stations don't need to be nearly as complex as things like the DC Metro or even really Toronto GO stations, but having more than a concrete slab would be a great idea. I'm a fan of the Camden Yard station in Baltimore, as it has a fairly modern waiting area, but many stations could use even less than that and still be fine. I think Crystal City is a good example of a station that would be perfectly adequate. But realistically, I would like to see an indoor waiting area whenever possible, because people could be waiting a while, and the summers here do get pretty hot, and though the winters get pretty mild, it can get fairly cold. Since many of these stations also run Amtrak service, a single standard station design isn't possible, but ensuring a minimum of a platform-length shelter, ticket machines, benches, outlets, signboards, bike parking, and routing of local bus services shouldn't be too much to ask for. Also, let's maybe renovate the connections to Metro at Alexandria, Crystal City, L'Enfant Plaza, and College Park. In conclusion, that is what I think a primary route for a dramatically improved DC regional rail system could look like. Regular trains on a United route through DC and Baltimore with regular frequent service, upgraded stations, and a new connection to SEPTA and Delaware. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this.